This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're picking up on the breaking news on Capitol Hill this evening. The House voting just moments ago, passing a short-term funding bill to prevent a government shutdown tomorrow night. It comes after no shortage of GOP infighting, chaos, confusion over what the president really wants. And, of course, it's far from over. Democrats say they've got the votes to block it in the Senate. And if they do, or if Republicans can't agree among themselves and a shutdown happens, that would make history, the first one ever when the same party controls Congress, the White House. A lot to get to. CNN's Phil Mattingly begins our coverage from the Capitol. So what do we know about how this vote finally came together?
Well, Anderson, as you noted, it was a day that started with confusion. The president seeming to imply he was opposed to a key element of this deal. It was a day that continued with fierce lobbying behind the scenes by House Republicans. A recognition, Anderson, that they were going to get no Democratic help on passing this. They needed to do this themselves. And there were conservatives that had real problems with both the scale and scope of what this government funding bill would actually do. But by the middle of the day, I was told by top leadership aides that Speaker Ryan and his team felt like they were in a good place. In the hours that followed, the House Freedom Caucus, the conservatives who've been raising concerns about the bill, started to fall into line. And shortly before the vote, that caucus confirmed that they were in majority in support of that proposal, clearing the way for its passage. It is a big victory for Speaker Ryan and Republicans, getting something done on their own without Democratic help. But in terms of what happens next, it's still an open question, Anderson.
So it's on to the Senate. What's the prognosis there?
Yeah, look, if you had money on not having a government shutdown right now, your bet's not looking very good. Plain and simple, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell needs 60 votes in the U.S. Senate to be able to move things forward because of attendance issues. He has 50 Republicans. It is now very clear he will not be able to secure the votes of at least 10 Democrats. He's losing some of his own members on this government funding bill as well. Where does that actually leave things? It is an open question. You ask Democrats what the end game is here. They make clear they want a vote on an immigration bill. They want to attach some type of DACA resolution to any government funding bill, or at least reach some deal on that front. Republican leaders, the president himself, have been very clear, Anderson, that is not coming now or any time in the near future. So where do they currently stand? Working on the blame game. They are digging in both sides. It is not actually clear when this is going to end. Things will start moving forward tonight. But again, they'll move forward to a vote that at this point, everybody knows is going to fail. We are now approaching 24 hours until the government shuts down. And as of now, there's no real solution or game plan for what happens next, Anderson.
All right, Phil Mattingly, thanks very much. Let's go next to the White House and CNN's Jim Acosta. What's the White House saying at this point?
Well, Anderson, what they're saying is that obviously they're watching this. The president's watching this all unfold. They're waiting to see what will happen in the Senate. But in the meantime, this administration has to get ready for the event of a potential government shutdown. And so I talked to a senior administration official earlier this evening who said in the last couple of days, White House officials have been talking to the various agencies to basically send the message that this should be minimally a minimal disruption for the general public, was how this senior administration official put it. And essentially, one of the things that they're talking about is getting the message to, say, the National Park Service, which is always a symbol during these government shutdowns when Yosemite and other national parks close. This senior administration official was saying that in the event of this government shutdown under the Trump administration, that some national parks and monuments and memorials that rely on minimal staffing, that those facilities should remain open. And this administration official cited the World War II memorial in the National Mall as an example. Now, if this goes late Friday night, one thing that they've been studying over here, Anderson, is whether or not the president could send out a tweet late Friday night, early Saturday morning, if this gets passed in the Senate, to basically say, listen, I agree with this continuing resolution to keep the government open, and that tweet was essentially send a signal that the U.S. government is going to remain open. It's sort of uncharted waters to some extent, in that the president feels that a tweet, or the president's team is looking at the possibility that a tweet could send a signal to the world that the federal government is not shutting down.
The White House, I mean, this president has received some criticism from Republicans, from Mitch McConnell and others, for essentially not being clear enough on what they actually want.
That's right. And that was going on today. You know, the president earlier this morning sent out that tweet saying that the Children's Health Insurance Program, if that's extended, that should be part of a longer budget deal, not a short-term budget deal, which obviously was in conflict with what the House Republicans were talking about earlier today. Anderson, I was talking to some sources this evening that were saying that there's some grumbling inside the Republican Party right now. There's a feeling over on the House side that the president did not put in as many phone calls as he should have. that he should have been working the phones a lot harder as this was getting down to the wire. And there's a feeling inside the White House. I talked to a source close to the White House and the House Freedom Caucus who said earlier this evening that there is a feeling that House Speaker Paul Ryan was struggling to put together the votes needed to get this continuing resolution passed. Now, obviously, it's happening, so that criticism doesn't really pass any muster. But there's certainly some grumbling inside the party tonight as to how this is going down. But, Anderson, they can only blame themselves. They're in charge of the White House. They're in charge of the Congress. If this government shuts down late tomorrow night, it's a Republican shutdown.
Do they have a contingency plan if the bill fails in the Senate?
Not at this point. And, Anderson, one thing that we're really going to have to keep our eye on, and that is whether or not the president goes forward with his plans to leave for Mar-a-Lago tomorrow. He is supposed to celebrate the one-year anniversary of being sworn into office. That is supposed to take place Saturday night at Mar-a-Lago. The Trump campaign and the Republican Party, they've been putting out emails inviting people to participate in this event and to fundraise off of this event. And so the optic will be there, the image will be there, potentially, of the president of the United States as the government is shutting down, getting on a plane to go down to Mar-a-Lago and potentially party with donors and so on as this government is shutting down. Now, the White House is not saying at this point whether or not those plans will change, but it was interesting to note when the senior administration official was saying earlier this evening that the president could essentially send out a tweet signaling his support for a continuing resolution. That sounds like a contingency plan that would allow the president to go down to Mar-a-Lago and still allow this government to shut down while the negotiations continue over the weekend. Now, I should point out, this official that I was talking to earlier this evening was stressing and trying to make the case that if the government shuts down over the weekend, that is not a huge issue in their feeling, in their view, because many federal workers are off over the weekend. The question is how long it lasts and what kind of damage is done to this White House image and to the GOP's image moving forward.
Right.
Anderson.
Jim Acosta, appreciate that. Now to a member of the conservative GOP House Freedom Caucus, Virginia Congressman Tom Garrett. Congressman, good to have you on. You voted
Anderson,
for the
always good to be with you.
You voted for the continuing resolution. What got you to yes?
Well, I mean, look, we've been very vocal on the children's health insurance program known as CHIP. I think it's ironic that, by my count, 186 Democrats just voted not to reauthorize children's health insurance through 2023. It was interesting when Jim, who I hold in high regard, said if we have a government shutdown, it's going to be the Republicans' fault. Sure, we hold both chambers in the White House. We need 60 votes to get this sort of thing through the Senate. And I got 186 Democrats voting to shut the government down, along with 6 Republicans. So I would ask the American people to just do the math. We've had 186 people vote to shut the government down. They were almost all, or those were all Democrats and 6 Republicans. Meanwhile, 200 and some odd Republicans voted to keep it open and fund the children's health insurance program through 2023. That's the right thing to do. I find myself sort of living in a strange world here.
Do you worry, though, just, the optics of people who say, well, look, you do have the White House, you do have Congress, and yet you're not all on the same page?
Oh, I think the American people don't want us to all be on the same page. Would you want to live in a world where every single person with a particular letter by their name could be counted upon to vote the exact same way, or would you like people to think freely? So I respect people who might dissent. I don't understand, though, why Leader Pelosi has allowed and, in fact, led and whipped her caucus to vote against children's health insurance so many times. And, Governor McAuliffe in Virginia, a guy who I consider a friend, sort of chastised the Republican House delegation of Virginia for not having CHIP done. I'm 4-0 voting for it. Leader Pelosi, I don't know, has she voted for it yet? So at some point, people are going to start looking at how people actually vote, because that's what matters. And look, this is going to be a Schumer shutdown if it's a shutdown, because watch what happens in the Senate. If they vote to shut the government down, it's going to be a vast majority of Democrats that do so.
When the president called into the Freedom Caucus meeting today, I wonder if you could talk about what he said. Did it have an impact on you, some of your fellow Freedom Caucus members, getting to yes?
I wasn't privy to that conversation.
Okay. Senator Lindsey Graham said today that they need a leader in the president. As you know, Senate Majority Leader McConnell has said he doesn't even know what the president wants. Do you believe that's a fair criticism, that the president has not been clear enough in explaining exactly what he wants?
Yeah, I'm not going to defend people in positions of attack people in positions of leadership for asking for clarity from the White House. I think, though, that the president can put that shoe on the other foot and ask for clarity from the legislative branch. I hate governing by CR. It's not the way we're supposed to do business. For the record, the House has passed 12 separate budget bills for the first time in 14 years. They languish in the Senate. I told somebody the House moves slowly, but compared to the Senate, we're the Millennium Falcon. We just did the Kessel Run in 4 parsecs. So, I think Leader McConnell has a right to speak to the president and say, this is what I need from you. I think the president has a right to say, this is what I need from you all. And I'm not going to get into the he said, she said sort of pedantics. I think right now one of the biggest problems in America on both sides of the aisle is the tone. And if I have anything to do with it, it's going to be pointing out this vote count, which is that the vast majority of Democrats, led by former Speaker Pelosi, voted to shut down the government and not fund children's health insurance. And yet again, I, who am labeled a staunch conservative, am spotless in voting to fund this important program that takes care of the most vulnerable among us. So again, it's an interesting world.
So what happens to this bill when it gets to the Senate? Do you think it passes there, or do you think there would be a shutdown?
Well, I'm hopeful that it passes. It's interesting because I think America needs to do a better job understanding the rules of the Senate. If, in fact, you're going to get to the point where you need 60 votes, there's a filibuster process that could actually be invoked. I would say to Majority Leader McConnell that we'd like to see him make this process play fully out. Let's see how committed Chuck Schumer is to denying children's health insurance. Let's see how committed Chuck Schumer is to shutting down the government. Not throw up our hands and say, well, but that's too hard. So I'm not going to conjecture. I'm not going to speculate on what they'll do in the Senate, except to say I'm proud that we voted tonight not only not to shut the government down, but to extend this children's health insurance coverage to 9 million American children who had nothing to do with the circumstances in which they find themselves.
Congressman Garrett, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Always great talking to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care. Joining me now is CNN political analyst David Gregory and chief political analyst Gloria Borger. Gloria, clearly, we're watching this play out in real time. Which party do you think has the most at stake tonight? Because clearly, you just heard from Congressman Garrett, who's trying to call this a Schumer shutdown, trying to put all the blame on Democrats if, in fact, it doesn't pass in the Senate. Right, and trying to make the case that Democrats are against extending children's health insurance, which I don't think is the issue here. I think it's gotten so convoluted that the public's going to have a hard time trying to figure out who to blame, and they should probably blame both sides in this. But as you pointed out at the top of the show, this is a Republican-controlled Washington, period. White House, House, Senate. And, I think in the end that the people in charge are the people who generally get the blame. And I think this is no way to run a government. Don't forget, the bill that they voted on in the House tonight only extends through February 16th. So they're just kicking the can down the road here. And this is what Democrats are saying they don't want to do anymore. They don't want to just kick the can down the road. They want to come up with some solutions, particularly on the issue of Dreamers, which was not included at all in the House bill. David, we heard the criticism from Graham. We heard from McConnell. Is it clear to you whether President Trump understands, at least of this morning when his tweets again caused consternation within his own party, what was in this funding measure and what was not in it?
It's not clear to me that he cares necessarily, because he's not standing by the party. He's someone who campaigned on the promise of draining the swamp and changing the way Washington worked. He also has demonstrated that he would step back and separate himself from establishment Republicans who seem to govern in a way that disappoints a lot of his voters. Well, the problem now is that the Republican leader, as you pointed out, says he's not sure what the president wants with regard to immigration. You've got a prominent supporter of the president in Lindsey Graham who says it's time for him just to be a leader. So I'm sure he understands what the ramifications are, but he is still all over the place, which is no way to get to what you need, which is either a short-term fix or pave the way to get something big. And if it's a kind of chaos theory negotiation, we haven't seen a lot of that before. Maybe with President Trump, it'll be different. Yeah, David, Gloria, just stay tuned for just a minute. We've got to take a quick break. I want to talk to you more when we come back. Also tonight, the president promising over and over again to be the best deal maker. We'll talk more about his role in all of this. And ahead, more breaking news on a very different subject. New reporting on Citizen Trump, the porn star, and candidate Trump's alleged payoff to her. That and Trump attorney Michael Cohen's reported role.
Hey there, it's Alicia Malone. I'm the host of the Filmstruck podcast, a show made by film lovers for film lovers. We have great conversations with people working behind the scenes in Hollywood movies, like Liz Hannah and Josh Singer. This is an incredible story. It is the very first feature film script for Liz Hannah. She wrote it without knowing if it would ever make the big screen, and then
3 months later, I got a call that Stephen, Tom, and Meryl were all reading it and that they were really thinking about doing it. So that was the best and most terrifying phone call I've ever gotten.
Can you imagine your very first feature film being made by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep? Make sure you subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We're just getting more information now. We've learned that in a matter of minutes, the Senate may actually take up legislation to prevent a shutdown. This was not expected tonight. Now we're learning otherwise. We're learning the initial vote, a motion to proceed, may happen any moment. Let's just go back to Phil Mattingly right now. Phil, what's going on?
Yeah, so basically the Senate is going to, once they get the House bill, they're going to take it up on the floor. What they will first do is have a vote, as you noted, on the motion to proceed. Basically, that would get them onto the bill. That is a simple majority threshold, so they need 51 votes to actually move that forward. As of this moment, both Republicans and Democrats believe the votes are there to do that. That is not the vote that everybody needs to keep an eye on. The vote that everybody needs to keep an eye on is the next vote. Anderson, that would be the vote that has the threshold of 60 votes. That would be the vote where Democrats plan to hold off on giving Majority Leader Mitch McConnell the votes to actually move forward on the bill. Now, when that vote will actually happen is still open for debate. They would have to get an agreement in terms of the timing on that. But I think the key issue right now is, and I've been batting back and forth with Senate and Republican aides since the House passed their bill, is there any movement? Is there any idea about how this is all going to play out, not just tonight, but over the next couple of days? And the answer is no. There is no necessary definite strategy in terms of how this is going to work on both sides, other than Republicans are dug in, Democrats are dug in, and the one thing we know for certain is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell does not have the 60 votes at this moment to move forward on that House-passed bill. And until he does, the government is still on that path, Anderson, to shut down tomorrow night.
All right, Phil, we'll continue to check in with you as this story continues to break at this hour. Let's go back to Gloria Borger and David Gregory. Gloria, when you hear Republicans say, "Well, look, this is all going to be blamed on the Democrats. It's the Democrats' fault. They're against, helping kids." What is the Democratic argument?
Well,
I mean, is it just a political roll of the dice that they believe if it does shut down, Republicans will get the blame?
Well, look, the Democratic argument on children's health is, if this is so important to you Republicans, why didn't you take it up earlier this year when you could have, when the Democrats wanted to deal with it? I mean, children's health insurance is something that you can bring up on the floor any time and renew it. And they've been screaming about it the Democrats have been screaming about it for quite some time. I think, look, these people, I was just talking to a senior Democratic leadership aide who pointed out to me that we have not talked to Republicans since Donald Trump became president. We really don't deal with each other. So they're kind of flying by each other here. The Democrats are incensed about what the president said, his vulgar remarks on immigration. That added heat to the fire here. They're concerned about Dreamers. They think this is something that should have been done a while ago. Right. And the Republicans are effectively trying to bribe Democrats, saying, look, we're going to pass this children's health insurance. And I don't know how they get out of this, to be honest.
Yeah, David?
I think a big part of the Democratic strategy is resistance. I mean, that's what you've seen. They want to fight on the terrain of the president's a bad guy, he's unfit, this is their argument, and that he is racist, as you've heard, obviously, and that his views on immigration are un-American. That's the ground they want to fight on. They want to make this a proxy fight over his views on immigration. They don't want to take him on jobs or how the market is doing. And so that's the bet here. There's a lot of energy in the Democratic base, political base, leading up in this election year, leading up to 2020, about where were you, did you stand up to Trump, and by proxy, the Republicans. So I think that's what's driving a lot of this right now, and they think this may be the best moment of leverage. The irony is that with a little bit more space, they might just be able to get the bigger deal that a mercurial president might be able to come up with, given the fact he's been all over the place.
Well, Gloria, I'm talking about deals. The president likes to call himself a deal maker. He's certainly done it a lot. I just want to show a little bit of sort of all the times he's talked about that.
We need somebody with great energy, with great passion, with great deal-making skills.
I'm going to make the great deals.
I am going to make great deals for our country. I mean, what I do is I do deals. I deal. I negotiate by creating leverage so I can extract a good deal for the United States, for the people.
I make deals. I negotiate. Everybody wants me to negotiate. That's what I'm known as a negotiator.
I'm so anxious to negotiate. Nobody can out-negotiate these deals.
I will make a great deal and lots of great deals for the American people. I am a deal maker, and that's what the country needs, is a deal maker. We don't make great deals anymore, but we will once I become president.
I'm a closer. We're going to close. We're going to start winning so much, just like the video. We're going to win and win and win.
It's so interesting, Gloria, because, we've seen just in the last week and a half, when cameras were in that bipartisan meeting on immigration, the president not seeming to exactly know what actually he does believe in, agreeing with Dianne Feinstein first, then with Congressman McCarthy, who sort of interceded to do an intervention to explain what the Republican policy was, and then kind of going back to the Democratic policy.
Well, I think, what you saw was that the president doesn't have any set of beliefs. His belief is that he wants to win and he wants to be regarded as the person who brought the deal over the finish line. But Lindsey Graham told him that you have to be involved. Mitch McConnell came out and said, look, if we know where the president stands on immigration, maybe we can get something done here. And you saw him this morning upend this entire debate by tweeting about a clean CR and saying that children's health shouldn't be a part of it because he didn't understand that it was a 6-year renewal. So this is not a negotiator. This is somebody who's not paying attention to the details. Yeah. And you saw his own chief of staff talk about that yesterday as well, that the president has evolved. Well, I think the president may be learning, but then he shoots his mouth off, and we don't know what he believes.
Yeah. Gloria Borger, David Gregory, thanks very much. Coming up, who are shaping up to be the winners and losers in the negotiations surrounding all of this? We'll ask two people who've had seats at the table at the White House and in the Senate next. We're now waiting for the Senate to take its first vote on a short-term spending bill to head off a shutdown tomorrow night. As Phil Mattingly reported just a moment ago, Republicans apparently do not have the support they need. In other words, if a vote happens now, it would fail. Some Republicans pin some of the blame so far on the president. Listen to what two members of the president's own party had to say.
I'm looking for something that President Trump supports, and he's not yet indicated what measure he's willing to sign. As soon as we figure out what he is for, then I would be convinced that we were not just spinning our wheels going to this issue on the floor, but actually dealing with a bill that has a chance to become law and therefore solve the problem.
You can't blame President Trump for a broken congressional system, but we do need a better partner down at the White House.
Well, they might be pointing fingers at the president. No doubt most Republicans, as we talked to Congressman Garrett earlier tonight, are going to be blaming this on Democrats. With me now, if there is a shutdown, two CNN political commentators who know a lot about these types of negotiations, what's at stake, what can hold things up, former White House Communications Director for President Obama, Jen Psaki, and former Senator Rick Santorum. Senator Santorum, the House has voted, so all eyes now turn to the Senate. Can you just walk us through what's likely going on behind the scenes right now?
Well, I mean, they're obviously trying to get to the bill. They'll have to move to proceed, which usually the Republicans will, whether you're for or against what the House passed, the Republicans will line up and will support the leader's ability to bring up whatever bill he wants. So that should not be a big deal. And then it's just a matter of whether they can twist enough arms and get enough Republicans to show some unity. The whole idea for Republicans is to try to show solidarity, right, and try to get as many people. So whether they get to 50 or 51 would be great. If they can get to a number, then they can point the finger pretty clearly at the Democrats and say, look, we put up all the votes we could to make this thing work, and the other side isn't helping us. But if they come up short, I mean, if 5, 6, 7, 10 Republicans vote no, then it's a little harder for them to make the case that they're responsibly governing.
Jen, I mean, you were part of the Obama administration during the shutdown in 2013. Does a shutdown really work out well for anybody? Because I'm guessing both sides right now are hoping the other side gets the blame.
Shutdowns are never great politics, Anderson, but there have been 4. This would be the 4th shutdown in the last 25 years. Republicans have been blamed, if you look at polling, every single time because they controlled chambers of Congress. So there's no reason to believe that would be different. In this particular scenario tonight, there are 4 Republican senators who have said they wouldn't support this. So you're looking at a scenario where McConnell would have to get 13 Democrats on board to get to the 60, which is a very hard hurdle. But the Democrats I've spoken to, they don't want a shutdown. It's not great politics. What they want is they want to use this leverage to get the Republicans, a larger swath of them, to the negotiating table, to address DACA, to make this a longer-term spending bill. That's what they really want to get to.
But why go for everything all at once? I mean, Jen, couldn't Democrats just say, well, look, we'll get the child, the CHIP program, and we'll do DACA next? Is it just all about leverage?
Well, part of it's leverage, which they don't have frequently because Democrats don't control anything in Washington, but they feel they were promised a deal on DACA in December. That has not been delivered on. And they're talking, this is not just a political issue for many Democrats, it's a moral issue. You're talking about 700,000 people whose lives are hanging in the balance. And they don't trust that if Republicans say, we'll address that in February, that it will actually happen. So they feel now is the time where they need to get a deal on this.
Yeah, the problem with that, Anderson, is that the deal they put forward wasn't just about DACA. It was about 10 million folks who could, in one way or another, stay in this country indefinitely. And so if their concern was about DACA, they should have brought a compromise deal to the president that just dealt with DACA. They didn't. So, they were overreaching and they're getting their hands slapped as a result of this. So you make up the good point. Every Democrat that's voting no tonight is voting against a bill that they support. There's nothing in this bill the Democrats oppose. So you say, well, why don't you just take what everybody agrees with and then come back and get the next bite at the apple? And really, let's be honest, no one's going to negotiate an immigration bill in the next 24 hours. I mean, it's just way too complicated to do that. This really gives the Democrats a month to still have leverage. They're going to come back in a month. They're going to need another vote. They're going to have to make another compromise. Republicans are, if they're going to get Democratic votes to pass it. Now they don't have children's health insurance, if this passes, as a leverage point to get Democrats to vote for it. I don't really see the angle. And candidly, to just contradict Jen a little bit, the reason Republicans got blamed for the last shutdowns was because Republicans were demanding something other than a clean bill. The Democratic presidents wanted, or Republican presidents in some cases, wanted a clean bill, and the Congress said, no, we want to put this. There's things in here we don't like and we want out, or we want to put in there. And that's why they lost. The Democrats are now the ones doing that, and I think that puts them in real precarious situation.
Senator Santorum, you heard what Lindsey Graham had to say earlier today. Do Republicans need a better partner in the White House, as Senator Graham says?
I think he's right. I don't agree with what Lindsey's doing on immigration, but I think he's right that the president, and Mitch McConnell's right, the president needs to show more leadership of what he wants. As good as the optics were for the president in that meeting that he had, he really did not provide any clarity as to what he was willing to sign and what he wasn't. He listed 4 things, but then was all over the place as to whether he would accept pieces of those things. He needs to be very clear about what he will and what he won't accept. And let's be honest, the 4 things the president's asking for are things that Democrats by and large support.
Senator Santorum, Jen Psaki, thanks very much. The House Intelligence Committee is just now releasing the full testimony of the co-founder of Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm behind the so-called Trump dossier. We're going to take a look at new details from that ahead. Also, new reporting tonight following the money allegedly from the presidential candidate, Donald Trump, to the porn star, what the Wall Street Journal is now reporting when 360 continues. There's more breaking news tonight, which on just about any other news day might be a lead. The House Intelligence Committee has just released the transcript of Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson's testimony. And the committee's top Democrat, California Congressman Adam Schiff, says it reveals what he calls serious allegations about the Trump organization, Russian nationals, and the very thing that Steve Bannon reportedly warned about, which is money laundering. Our Jim Sciutto has been going through the transcript, all 6 hours of testimony worth. He joins us now. What have you been learning?
Well, Anderson, Congressman Schiff, of course, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, drawing particular attention to this mention again of money laundering. Trump Organization, an allegation I should make clear, Trump Organization, money laundering for Russian nationals. And Schiff making the point, isn't this interesting? Because Steve Bannon, the president's former chief strategist, made a similar reference in Michael Wolff's book. Now, to be clear, there was in this testimony no evidence, hard evidence presented by Glenn Simpson. And in fact, he was pressed by Republicans saying, OK, you're making this allegation. What can you show us to prove that this is true? So he granted that. No hard evidence he could present there. But Schiff making The additional point then, well, why won't my Republican colleagues let us on the committee at least pursue this, investigate if there is anything there? That's the frustration. Now, I will say, Anderson, if that's not happening in the House Intelligence Committee, we do have a fair amount of confidence that that is at least a line of inquiry for Robert Mueller's investigation.
So he didn't have enough evidence or any really evidence on the money laundering claims, but his testimony also focused on the so-called dossier. What did he say about that?
That's right. Listen, look back at the dossier. The dossier was a series of memos that allege that members of the Trump organization, the campaign, were in touch with Russian nationals, some connected to Russian intelligence, involved in what was alleged to be a conspiracy to trade information, damaging information on Hillary Clinton, et cetera, help turn the election campaign. And the point Simpson made was that, okay, those were early intelligence leads. But if you look at what has been revealed since then, things like the Trump Tower meeting in June 2016, other surreptitious contacts between Trump campaign people, George Papadopoulos and others, discussions of damaging information on Hillary Clinton, that some of what was alleged in the dossier has stood up, has come out in public since then. And that's a point just to counter what you've heard often from the president, that this is a phony dossier, et cetera, that in fact, one of the central allegations of the dossier, there has been at least some evidence of that revealed since the dossier was first revealed.
Yeah. Jim Sciutto, appreciate it. Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro sits on the House Intelligence Committee. He joins us now. Congressman, these allegations that the Trump organization may have engaged in money laundering with Russian nationals, can you just explain exactly what Glenn Simpson actually said about that?
Well, sure. You can see from the transcript that he had this concern based on basically a years-long worth of research, and not just cursory stuff, but actually going into court filings and corporate filings. He had this concern about the possibility of money laundering. This idea that you might have, for example, Russians who have somehow acquired money illegally, and they're needing to cleanse that money, and they're investing it in Trump properties. But as Jim mentioned, and as you see in the transcript, he said at the end of the day that he couldn't provide hard evidence of that. He only saw signs of that. And the reason he said he couldn't provide hard evidence is because Fusion GPS was not a governmental entity that could subpoena different entities for information. And the House Intelligence Committee, I think, is unlikely to follow up on a lot of those leads, unfortunately. Part of that because of the resources committed to the committee, the politics of it. But I do think that it's something that Bob Mueller